Hello, welcome back to everyone that's tuned in to the American Ultra Stock channel. Thank you so much for being here today. Bringing to you guys, trying to brighten up your day after what happened over the weekend, and we are out of Copa America, so let's shift the attention to the news. We are in the transfer window, so it's important to keep these updates. We had 2 other videos previously. Please make sure to check those out if you want to. And now today, bringing to you guys, starting off with great news, perhaps. Maybe something gets a stagnation and he should be at a better club, but the best right back in the world, Sergiño Dest, has signed for PSV on a deal that's good until 2028. Braden, this came out of nowhere. We didn't really see any updates, and bam, he's back at PSV. So I think it's a good move. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Joe Scally might be coming for his title of best right back in the world. But this is incredible news. I think we said it when we did our end of season review stream. Dest absolutely had to return to PSV because with the uncertainty over his future, obviously he tore his ACL at the end of the season in training. It's just a horrible thing to happen. If he had stayed at Barcelona, who knows what would have happened, because his contract would have expired. He would have been on the open market, and there's not a lot of good destinations for him to go just because of his play style and how polarizing it is. As a defender, he doesn't really do a lot of defensive work. He's more involved in the attack, and I think it suits PSV perfectly, just the style of play that they have, and especially since they're so dominant in the Eredivisie, they have a lot of attacking chances, and he's crucial to their system. So I think it's perfect. Obviously, he's still not going to be back for a while until at least 2025 because of the injury, but he now has a club. I mean, he had been rehabbing there anyway, even though he was technically a Barcelona player. He was still rehabbing at the PSV facilities, which maybe was a little bit of a hint that he was going to rejoin, but I think it's excellent for his career that he's back, and a great deal for PSV too. Props to Ernie Stewart once again, always for PSV, 0 transfer fee for Sergiño Dest, for a player who was just team of the season in the Eredivisie. I understand that the injury and his concerns at the top level maybe can lower the transfer fee a little bit, but to have it be nothing is kind of crazy. As Yuri's doing a flip, that's how excited he is for the transfer. Barcelona do get a bit of a hefty sell-on fee, but I can't really see Dest leaving for a long time. I mean, he has a contract until 2028. He seems to be very happy at PSV, and if they continue to win things and have it be as successful as they were this past season, I think this is going to be excellent, and he can spend a large majority of his career thriving there.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think we always tend to overhype our players a little bit. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Dest, but this move provides him stability that he needed for such a long time. I mean, we saw what happened at Barca. The Milan move was a disaster. And now, although I think that I would like to see him at a higher level, I have no issues with him staying there, becoming a cult hero, because the fans really like him, which is really nice. And yeah, I think it's a good move for Dest for the time being. Maybe he stays for the rest of his career there. I think it's fine. They are playing at a good level in Europe as well. So moving on to not so good news, we're going to have to talk about, well, Weston McKennie. It's fair to say had a horrible summer, even in the friendlies, dating back to the friendlies, had a really good season at Juventus. We're all hyped up, but now after the deal with Aston Villa broke through, because apparently it was due to wage demands, well, now the only clubs that are linked to him, we reported Cincinnati in the past, but now Fenerbahce new manager Jose Mourinho seems to like Weston McKennie, which is a crazy combination in my opinion. Where is this deal standing at the moment, Braden? Do you think it will happen? What are the reports, and what do you think would happen if West was to go play in Turkey under Mourinho?
Yeah, I mean, the Weston McKennie transfer saga seems to be a weekly segment in our transfer update. And who knows, maybe we'll have a new update every week until he does finally get a new club. Because based on the signings Juve have made this summer, I mean, it was clear they wanted him out when they tried to include him in the swap deal with Douglas Luiz. I still think that probably would have been his best option, but he was too greedy, wanted too much money, and ultimately sold his probably only good destination. As of now, who knows? Maybe another solid club could come in for him, but right now it's not really looking good for his future. They even signed Kefren Turam today as we record this. Juve did, so he really has no future at Juventus. He's going to leave it at some point. I think Fenerbahce, the fact that he is 25 and getting linked to MLS and the Turkish Super League, no disrespect necessarily to Fenerbahce and some of the other big clubs there. They're massive clubs, huge fan base. Their fans are absolutely crazy. They have constant showings in Europe, but the league overall is a huge step down. It's usually somewhere where we see not necessarily failed European players go, but European players who are a little bit over the hill, like Zaha, Dusan Tadic, players like that going to that league. And I just think it's a little concerning for McKennie to be linked there at the age of 25 when arguably he should be just hitting his prime right about now. I think it's especially interesting that Mourinho is the one who is specifically interested in him, just because Mourinho doesn't like to take stuff from players. And I feel like McKennie's attitude off the pitch is very polarizing. A lot of fans love it because, I mean, he's a very funny guy. He loves to make people laugh, and it can be good at times. But also, I mean, I think we've seen a little bit of a mentality problem. We all know he has problems keeping his weight in check, whether that's on him or not. I think it's just his body type, really. But it's a little concerning. And I mean, we saw how Mourinho treated Brian Reynolds. I think one of the only Americans, maybe the only one that he's worked with actually in the past. We saw how that worked out with him at Roma. He ended up escaping to Belgium, but it was clear Mourinho did not tolerate whatever was going on behind the scenes with him. I really can't see this working out. If it does happen, I think it makes sense for the league because he's a somewhat big name player. I mean, he's had a lot of iconic moments within Europe, especially that goal against Barcelona a couple of seasons ago, and he was very good for Juve this past season. But ultimately, I think based on the links that have been going around, it kind of seems like his career might be on the decline. And based on the performances we've seen from him with the national team, it might be time to look in a different direction.
Yeah, which is really sad to talk about. I completely understand and agree. Not agree. I agree with what you said, and I completely understand when McKennie wants more money at this moment. I understand because it's probably the best contract that he can get in his career, looking at the age that he's at. But he's being too greedy. I mean, offered allegedly over north of $4 million a year, which is a big step up from the $3.5 million he's at Juve right now. The only clubs that can realistically spend that money on him are either MLS clubs or Saudi league clubs, and perhaps, I mean, Turkish league clubs, they are pretty wealthy as well, but it's a huge step down. Even Fenerbahce legend Alex, their best player ever in a lot of the fans' minds, he's a Brazilian. He says that it was a good move, but he always wished that he was in the first bracket of European clubs, and that's the thing that I think West should aspire to be at, and definitely a step down if he goes there. But still, stay tuned because I think it will be a weekly segment. Now, moving on to a player that for the first time is being featured right here is Josh Sargent. You see Braden's jersey right there at the back. Maybe you would have to update it to a Leeds jersey, Braden, because it seems like he's been linked there. We've seen what happened with other Americans in the past at Leeds. What do you think about this one?
I've already been burned with Leeds jerseys in the past. I'm not getting another one. Definitely not. But yeah, he has been linked to Leeds. I think it's very unsurprising that Sargent has had interest from higher level clubs after his season that he had, or I guess half season that he had with Norwich, because he was injured for the majority of the first half of the season. I think it was kind of inevitable that clubs around the Premier League level would be interested. We know Leeds ended up not getting promoted, but I think in all sense of things, they are a borderline Premier League level club. And especially if they do get Sargent, I back them fully to get promoted next season. Maybe that will help Aronson feel more at home when he comes back, and vice versa if the signing does go through. But I'm still very hesitant to see Americans at Leeds. In hindsight, they might have been right about McKennie, and maybe even Adams too, although I think he was treated very harshly. I think he was one of their best players when he was there before getting hurt. But I think I'm just a little tentative. It makes sense on paper if you ignore the whole Leeds aspect. And I mean, they've been linked to Americans in the past. McKenzie during the January window was linked there, and I think that move at the time kind of made sense on paper too. I'm just a little bit nervous due to how their fans have been treating Americans recently, but he is a good enough player to, in the championship, get a lot of goals. And if he does get off to a flying start, assuming the transfer happens, I'm sure the fans will love him. So ultimately, I think it would probably be better for his career if he did go there, just because I think they have a lot better chance at getting promoted. Not to say Norwich doesn't have a chance, but I think Leeds are in pole position to get automatic promotion, maybe even fight for the title in the championship next season. And it would basically assure him a move to the Premier League. Even if they ultimately fall short, I think he'll be in a good enough position to have a good enough season to ultimately be bought, as long as he can stay healthy. And that is a big if for Sargent. I mean, we know all the minor injuries that have stayed with him for the majority of this season, even caused him to miss a couple of national team camps. But at the end of the day, if this move happens, I wouldn't be too mad. But if it doesn't happen, I'd be perfectly fine with it.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't really like this one. I think it's a sideways move. If he was to move to the Prem, I would guess that this season, based on what he did, it would be enough to harness some interest from low-level Premier League clubs, maybe some newly promoted ones. Because moving to Leeds, we see how toxic it can be there, and I don't really fault the fans based on the environment that they were in, that they had to deal with. But yeah, I think he should seek a move outside of England, in my opinion. But if he is staying there, better to move to Leeds than stay at Norwich, I guess. So moving on right here to a player that, again, first time that he's going to be featured. Here's Alejandro Zendejas, completely forgotten by some of the fan base. And well, it looks like he wants to go to Europe, wants to be a part of the USMNT, and Fiorentina seem like the only plausible and actually confirmed interested club at the moment. Would you be a fan of that move, Braden? And do you think it would be enough to put him back in contention since, like you said, McKennie seems to be falling off, Luca de la Torre is the transfer listed as Celta de Vigo? Is there a chance for Zendejas to step up?
Well, first, I just want to give props to Zendejas because he had a very good season with Club America and Liga MX, winning the Clausura and Apertura with them, doing the domestic double. And the fact that he is not satisfied, I mean, we see so many Liga MX players stagnate there. And just if they do make moves, they're way overpriced to other big Liga MX clubs. They just kind of have a little transfer merry-go-round within the league, within the top clubs. But Zendejas, he's not satisfied with that. He wants more. He knows that to get back into the USMNT sphere, into the conversations, he needs to make the move to Europe, and he wants to do that. Club America do anticipate selling him this window, and I think that's a great thing for him. I do think the Gold Cup, the performances he had there in the summer of 2023 kind of overshadow his talent because, I mean, we know his performances there were very, very subpar, but I think he's a different player now. I think he's coming off a great season and he's very confident in himself. I think Fiorentina would be a perfect club to test himself. I think we've seen them buy traditionally a lot of players from South America / Central America kind of places. Liga MX may be a little bit different than some of the South American leagues, but I think Serie A makes sense for his play style, and ultimately I just want to see him test himself in Europe, and I love the fact that he is actually willing to do that. And with Tim Weah's red card, I mean, I advocated for him to be banned for at least a little bit from the USMNT. Maybe this is the perfect situation for Zendejas to come in. I mean, Aronson's the other option on that wing, but we know his club career has been stagnating for a while now. So I think the time is right for Zendejas to make his move and really stake his claim for a spot back in the roster. And if he makes a move and it goes well in Europe, I think he's 100% back in that conversation.
Yeah, I mentioned McKennie and Luca de la Torre because I think I had it on our depth chart videos. I really like Zendejas centrally. I think that he can be a really good player box to box. I don't know if he has the speed and the agility to play in as a winger in the top level, but hey, props to him for wanting to move out. I think he provides that versatility as well to play on both positions. So he has played there and done really well on both at Liga MX. So now, well, another transfer saga right here that seems to be a weekly feature. Tenor Tessmann, we saw the man Fabrizio Romano giving an update on him, saying that, well, Inter seems to be all agreed with Venezia, but it's just really an update. It's the highest caliber of news that you can get, but the terms that need to be resolved are Tessmann agreeing to stay back at Venezia for a year. Some reports from Gazzetta dello Sport and Il Toro, they both say that Vanoli, the manager that was that helped him in Venezia, now the manager at Torino, gave a very, very creative way for Torino to be back in the mix. They seem to be approaching Inter Milan to be the club where he's loaned back for a year. Since the first time around, this transfer didn't get sealed because he wasn't on par with being back at Venezia. What do you think about this one, Braden? And do you think he will end up being an Inter player and loaned to who?
I won't spend too much time on this one. We just decided to include it because, I mean, it is Fabrizio Romano. He's the most accurate transfer source reporting on it, so we thought it was worthy of being mentioned one more time. But like you said, it has become another weekly segment, him and McKennie battling it out for the biggest transfer saga of the USMNT summer. I think the Inter Milan deal will end up happening. I think they have too much of a need and too much financial acumen to not get it done. I would like to see him stay at Venezia for another year, just because I think the jump up from Serie B to Serie A, especially if you're going to a higher level club, is a big one. And being at a newly promoted club, helping them fight and hopefully survive relegation, stay in the league, I think would be big, and it'd be the win-win scenario for Venezia as well. They get the money in, they get another player on loan from Inter to help them, as well as Tessmann. And then they have enough money from the Serie A TV deals for the next season, assuming they do stay up, to finally bring in a proper replacement for Tessmann. And I think that would be a big thing for them to do, because he's probably the best player at the club right now. So I think it would make the most sense for Venezia to do everything in their power to keep him for one more year. I have said in the past, I think Torino is the perfect destination. It's a good enough step up, but not too big, where it maybe he'd be on the bench. I think he'd get a lot of play time there. It'd be at a high level. They could maybe even push for a European spot. I mean, we see these days so many Serie A teams do end up qualifying for European spots. Maybe Torino could push for 8th, get a Conference League spot or something like that. I think it's the perfect spot for him. I wouldn't be mad with either, just as long as he does get loaned out, because I think if he goes to Inter this year, especially if he does end up at the Olympics and has no real preseason, it could end up being a disaster.
Yeah, I think that there is no chance that even Inter would articulate keeping him around, and I think he's aware, and I don't think that Tessmann would take that as well. Just want to mention very quickly that Vanoli said in the past, when he took charge of Venezia, that he would keep them out of relegation and get to the playoffs. He did that. He said he was going to get promoted. He did that, and he was very vocal about needing 3 players, and mentioned Tessmann specifically, in order to get to Europe, and he said that he will do that for Torino. Very good manager, I think a very good guy, and if Tessmann moves there, it's the perfect destination. A manager he knows, get a lot of playing time. And now his former teammate, perhaps, Gianluca Busio, rumored right here with Parma. Early on in the transfer window, they said that they were interested, and Hellas Verona seems to be with more concrete interest, actually trying to inquiry about him. Do you think this move would be good for Busio? Do you think it's better for him to just stay at Venezia? Do you think it'll happen?
I'll make this one kind of short as well, because I think you mentioned it for Sargent to Leeds. I think both of these moves are very sideways, and I think they're just kind of unnecessary. I don't think turnover at Venezia makes a lot of sense, especially from key players, from their perspective, and for Busio's perspective as well. He's been in Venezia for so long. He knows the club, he knows the city, he knows the fan base, he knows the team. Maybe with a new manager coming in, a little bit of that will be shaken up. Yeah, I see the point there, but I think ultimately it's just better to stay, especially going to a club like Parma, who have also been newly promoted. Yes, they had a better season in Serie B. Maybe they'll have a better season and a better chance to stay in Serie A as well. But I think it makes more sense to stay at Venezia. And Hellas Verona, I mean, they had a solid season, finishing 13th last year, but I think it also has to be said, despite finishing that high, they were also only 3 points away from relegation. The relegation battle in Serie A last year was absolutely crazy. And I expect it to be the exact same this next season, which is why I think both of those clubs are very sideways moves. I just don't see the point in making a transfer just for the sake of making a transfer. It just makes more sense to stay.
Completely agree. Now, this one would have a lot of ramifications on where he goes to, perhaps for the rest of his career. Caleb Wiley being linked to Chelsea. Apparently, it would be an immediate loan move to Strasbourg. I think that there is concrete interest there, but we know Chelsea's a bit of a loan army. Do you think that Wiley is going to move, first of all? And do you think he would end up being a Lucas Piazon type of player where he gets loaned every single season? Or can he eventually break into Chelsea? Where do you see his development and his level at the moment, Braden?
Or even a Matt Miazga type of player. I mean, the exact same situation, an American going to Chelsea, getting loaned out every season. I do think that, I know the reports have been saying that it is the Chelsea Football Group or whatever they're called that's buying him. I think this transfer is specifically for Strasbourg, so I don't think it would be a loan from Chelsea. I do think it would be a permanent deal to Strasbourg, which makes it better. Definitely, because it's not as big of a step up. And I mean, we know Chelsea's history with loans. Some of them do work. Some of them do end up coming back to the first team and being very good players, helping them to historic accomplishments. I mean, Mason Mount, Fikayo Tomori, some examples of that, part of their Champions League run. But at the same time, I mean, there's countless examples of players in their loan army that don't pan out. I mean, if I were to name names, I think we'd be here all day. So ultimately, it's better that it would be just to Strasbourg, and who knows, maybe he could be joining up with Gaga Slonina. I've been advocating for Slonina to go there on loan this season for so long, since last January. It does look like it might actually happen. I really hope it does. I mean, we'll definitely make sure to keep you guys tuned in on that if any concrete rumors progress throughout the summer. But I do think it's time for Wiley to leave for Europe. Not necessarily, I don't know if he's ready yet. I think it would be better to go to a secondary tier league like an Eredivisie, like a Belgian Pro League, just because I'm not too convinced on his end product right now. He has a lot of raw potential, but I think he's stagnated a little bit at Atlanta. It's time for him to get out, but going to a level of a top 5 league, especially a club like Strasbourg, who next season, I mean, with the amount of players that Chelsea are signing and could potentially loan out, if they get the right additions in, they could be a very solid team in Liga next season. So I think it might be a little bit too big of a step up for Wiley, but at the same time, he does need to test himself in Europe because it's not working as great as we would hope with Atlanta. And I think it's better to move to Europe, as we've seen in the past with some players such as Tessmann, who we already mentioned. Go to Europe sooner rather than later. Even if you're not necessarily ready, your time will come.
Absolutely, and I will say I think that Wiley eventually will have to become a winger. I don't see enough defensive capabilities in him to be a left back at the top level. I think you do a Paredes and convert into a winger over there. But hopefully it happens for him. Better than staying at Atlanta, definitely. I would be afraid that he becomes an MLS lifer if he stays for 1 or 2 more seasons. Now, a player that was in MLS but abruptly seems to have moved. Maybe it has something to do with his ties and allegiance at the national team level. Fidel Barajas has moved to, well, hasn't moved yet, but there's strong interest from Chivas. Pretty certain that it will happen. He will be leaving Real Salt Lake after only combining with Diego Luna for what was like 5 months. How do you see this one? Do you think it's a big miss if we miss him at the national team level as well, which seems to be a trend? We seem to be losing a little bit of traction with the dual nationals.
Yeah, well, I will correct you a little bit because he actually just got announced as a Chivas player a couple hours prior to as we're recording this. And I mean, all the sources were reliable. It happened very quickly and out of nowhere. There was no rumors. It just kind of happened immediately, which is definitely interesting to say the least. And I'll give props to Real Salt Lake because they signed him from Charleston Battery after an incredible season for like around $250K, which is an unbelievable deal for one of the best wonder kids in North America, potentially one of the best in his position in the world. I think that's the level of talent that we're looking at. Now, whether he pans out, that's a different story, but turning that into a $4 million deal in the exact same season when he's only played limited minutes in MLS so far, gotten 2 assists, yes, but realistically, he hasn't gotten minutes. He hasn't even proven himself as a locked-in MLS starter yet. So the fact that he's going to Chivas for $4 million, I do think maybe, and now this is just speculation, but I think it's possible that the Mexican Football Federation, FMF, or maybe Chivas as well, saw the potential rumors that he was considering or potentially be close to making a one-time switch to the US, because that was a very real rumor that has happened very recently, and maybe they panicked a little bit and tried to get one of their top clubs, and particularly the club that is traditionally only Mexicans. I mean, we know they've kind of loosened up on that a little bit. They brought in Cade Cowell, who doesn't even really speak Spanish, represents the U.S. for better or worse. If he represented Mexico, it would be fine by me. But I do think that they may have panicked a little bit bringing Barajas. I'm not sure if he's Chivas level right now. I think he has the potential to be there. It'll be interesting to see if maybe they have him with their U23s or loaned out to a second division side. But we all know Liga MX has the same problem as the U.S. soccer. There's no promotion and relegation there anymore. So really, I think this is a backwards move for him. In terms of the level of the club, it's a good move, but I see his career stagnating. I mean, I mentioned already when we talked about Zendejas, a lot of players in Liga MX stagnate there. They don't end up making the move to Europe. Hopefully Barajas is different. Hopefully he proves me wrong and does end up going to Europe sooner rather than later. This is just a brief stop, and hopefully he does end up making the one-time switch to the US as well, because a player like his talent, especially on the wing, is something we could really, really use in the upcoming generation. I'm not too sure about this transfer from his perspective, but I wish him the best of luck. I hope he proves me wrong.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens and if it will be a big miss from the USSF and letting him go. I don't know if there is support to MLS clubs to keep players in dual nationals. I don't know what goes on there. I don't think anyone does. But moving on here to Gavin Beavers, linked to Newcastle. Very exciting move. How do you see this one planning out for the rest of his career as well? Do you think it is the right timing to go to Newcastle?
Yeah, ending it out with another bit of a prospect here, and I think this is a weird move. I do think Beavers has European potential. He's been very good in, admittedly, not as many appearances as I would have liked at Real Salt Lake this season. I think he should be their locked-in starter. I've advocated for that since basically the start of the season. For some reason, they keep alternating him with their experienced goalkeeper who makes like 3 mistakes every time he starts. Really doesn't make sense to me. But Beavers is in the mix, and with Kachin probably not making the roster because I think he won't get released by Barca, Beavers should be the starter for the U.S. at this summer's CONCACAF U20 Championship. I think he has very strong odds to be that. He has a lot of potential. He's a very exciting prospect in the goalkeeping position. I just don't know if a move to Newcastle is right since he hasn't, for better or worse, established himself as an MLS starter. It's kind of maybe similar to Barajas at Real Salt Lake, the same situation. They're getting solid minutes, but not locked-in starter minutes. Newcastle would probably be better than Chivas because it's more of a platform. Even if you do never play for the first team, there's opportunities for you to go to other European leagues as opposed to just staying in Liga MX and, like I said, joining the transfer merry-go-round that they have there. But I look at the goalkeeping situation at Newcastle, and there's no way he would be a first-team player immediately. I mean, they just signed Vlachodimos from Nottingham Forest, who is horrible. Granted, he had a horrible season there, even being worse than Matt Turner, which is a huge achievement based on his performances last year. But they also have Nick Pope, recent England international, although he was snubbed from the Euro squad. Dubravka as well. I think he might be leaving, but as of now, he's still a Newcastle player, has had an incredible Euros with Slovakia. There's just too many goalkeepers at the club for Beavers to step in and really be a first-team player. So I think for now, it's time to chill, stay, earn your spot at Real Salt Lake. But in the future, in the next coming seasons, I think a European move will happen, and I think he'll succeed.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Newcastle is likely signing him just for academy purposes. I think it's just so he can develop in Europe. Maybe that's a good thing. I mean, we need players to develop there. I think it's clear to see that the talent gap when they're developed here is quite big. But that's it for this week's transfer update. Let us know in the comments below what you think. Any of these moves that you were against or you think are really good. I think we're going to have a few sagas until the very end of the transfer window. Let us know about the McKennie situation if you think it's another club's going to pop up or not. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and we'll see you next time.